right, here we go. Okay, so when thinking about what what character I was gonna step into for this, I originally was gonna go a completely different direction with this. But there has been someone that I've been studying for the past couple of weeks from a class that I've been in, and just doing a lot of intense study on this person's life. And I really feel like, I don't know what my calling is, but I really feel like a lot of the stuff that God's going to have me do in ministry is going to be kind of along the same lines that this man was in the Bible. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to put myself in his shoes. And so I'm going to start out by asking you guys a question, much in the same way that Asa did, was that, has there ever been a word that God has given you or something that God has told you to say that has been tough? Whether or not it's to someone else, whether or not it's a word over a church or prophecy, I don't know where you guys stand with that, but something that is hard to say. It's not necessarily encouragement, it could be critical or in the form of rebuke, that kind of thing. The person that I want to share his life with you today is Jeremiah. And Jeremiah was no stranger to tough words. In researching his life and seeing the things that he had to say, he got criticism upon criticism upon criticism. And I'm pumped to share with you his life. So won't you meet him with me and jump into his world. Hello everyone. I am Jeremiah. They call me the weeping prophet. And I can hear it even now. You know, they've called me this. I know that I have this legacy of the weeping prophet. I can even hear Habakkuk saying, now look at you, the weeping prophet. Why don't you cry? And I'm like, Habakkuk? What kind of a name is Habakkuk? No one even knows who you are. Okay, come on. Like ease up, ease up. And so, you know, I've gotten that. And every time I think of that, every time I think of me being called the weeping prophet, I wonder, the people that call me that actually know why I was grieving? Do they know why I was weeping? Do they know why I had tears in my eyes? And I wanted to share that with you today. Just to give you a little bit of a background to my life. I grew up in this small town of Anathoth. It's about 3 miles north of Jerusalem. It's this little small pit town, if you want to call it that. And I was born into this priestly family. My father was a priest. I myself was in line to become a priest in Jerusalem. And as such, I became familiar with Jerusalem at a very young age. I knew the city, I knew the streets, the temple. I loved going to the temple with my family. But even from a young age, I could see the corruption. I could see the injustice that was going on in my town, in my city. And it grieved me. Even at a young age, I was able to see it. You know, I remember sitting down with my parents and talking to them about it and saying, you know, Dad, why is the temple being misused? Why is the temple, you know, they're not worshiping God alone. They're not worshiping, He's not the center of their worship. I don't understand. And he would just push it off as if it wasn't necessarily a big deal. And God really began to foster this in my life. And there was a point when He came to me and He said, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. A prophet to the nations. In my mind, I was like, what are you talking about, a prophet to the nations? I'm supposed to be a priest in this little town here. Like, I live near Jerusalem. Like, this is kind of my world. What do you mean a prophet to the nations? I don't necessarily want that. I'm just a kid. I'm just this young kid. I don't know how to talk to people. I don't know how to speak eloquently or form word paintings. I don't know what that is. And God told me, He said, do not call yourself just a youth. Do not say that about yourself. For all to whom I send you, you shall go, and every word that I give you, you will speak. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you to deliver them. And then I remember what happened next. As clear as day, He came to me in this vision, and he put His hand on my mouth. You can imagine what my response was. What are you doing, God? Put your hand on my mouth. God, is that how you want to reach me? I don't understand. So He put His hand on my mouth and He said, see, I have set you this day over nations and over kingdoms, to pluck up and to break down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. You can imagine, this call came to me around the age of 16. You can imagine what I was thinking. To build nations and to destroy them, to pluck and to plant. How is a teenager supposed to take that? But the funny thing is that when God gave me this word, He didn't leave it at that. He didn't leave me there. He gave me two visions. And I was walking in the garden, and I was walking in this garden with God, and I was talking to Him, and He said to me, Jeremiah, what do you see? What do you see? And I looked on the ground, and I saw this almond branch. And He said, okay, what do you see? And I said, I see it. I see this almond branch. And He said, behold, I am watching over my word. And I wondered, I was like, what does that mean, God? I don't understand what that means. But then I thought about it. See, in my language, the word for almond branch is shaked. Almond branch, shaked. The word watching, God said He's watching over His word, is shoket. Very similar. Who knew that even then God did puns? I don't know. I was crazy to think that maybe this is like the first pun in all of existence. I have no idea. But it was amazing that He was telling me that this word that I have placed in you, I will watch over it and allow it to grow, allow it to have life. It says, I will make you this day. He told me this. He said He's going to make me a fortified city, an iron pillar and bronze walls against the whole land, against all of the kings of Judah, its officials, its priests, and the people of land. They will fight against you, but they shall not prevail against you, for I am with you. It's funny to think that at this time God was calling me to have courage. And it was crazy to think that even at this time, the weight and the gravity of what God was going to have me speak to these people. I was only 16 years old. How can I talk to all these people? But here He's telling me, here He told me, time and time again, that He was going to make me a bronze iron wall against the nation. And that He would go with me, that He would be with me. And I really began to grasp this idea of God's character. I can understand that in my dealings with God and seeing Him in this area of my life, that He may be seen as vengeful or wrathful or hateful, and maybe He's not the kind of God that loves His people. I can understand that. But I implore you to listen with me today, because that is not the God that I know. That is not the God that spoke to me. That is not the God that touched me on the mouth and told me that He had a word for me to deliver to the nations. They call me the weeping prophet, just as I said before, and they call me that for a reason. I did. I wept. I wept day and night. Tears are my pillow, day and night. But I had a reason. I had a reason why. You see, the people of Judah forsake God over and over and over again. I want you to imagine this with me. Imagine you have a spouse, a husband or a wife. And you come home one day after a long day of work to find that they're cheating on you. Someone else is in your bed with your spouse. What is your reaction going to be? Immediately, I would think that you'd want to divorce them. Or if your capacity for grace is bigger, maybe you'll work with them through it. But imagine months later, time and time and time again, repeatedly cheating on you with someone else. What would you do? Would you be angry? I think that you would. Over and over again. God spoke to me, and He told me, He said, "They have loved to wander thus. They have not restrained their feet. Therefore I do not accept them. I will remember their iniquity and punish their sins. They've worshipped the works of their own hands. What wrong did your fathers find in me, that they went far from me and went after worthless things and became themselves worthless? Let my eyes run down with tears night and day, and let them not ease. For the virgin daughter of my people is shattered with a great wound, a grievous blow. My joy is gone, and grief is upon me. My heart is sick within me. Behold the cry of the daughter of my people from the length and the width of the land." Can you imagine that? Can you imagine the person that you love most in this world dismissing you as unimportant, dismissing you as not necessary? And because of this, one of the things that my people Judah followed after was Baal. And what Baal was this false god. He wasn't even a real, like, what? This false god, and what they would do is they would pray to him. He was basically a storm god. He would bring rain and allow crops to grow. And I remember that there was this one time where my country went through this crazy drought because they were praying. Isn't that funny? They prayed to Baal to bring the rains, and God closed up the sky to keep the rains from them. He cursed the land. And again, God's grief came upon me. Oh, that my head were waters and my eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people. For the wound of the daughter of my people is my heart wounded. I mourn, and dismay has taken hold on me. I don't understand why God would allow this to happen. I understand the grief, I understand the pain, but he's supposedly an all-loving God. He supposedly loves his people. Why? And so I would ask him. One of the things that I think that I'm known for is I complained. I went to God. I said, God, what are you doing? There was one time I went to him and I said, God, why do the wicked prosper? Why do these evil men have their way? Surely there are men in Jerusalem, surely there are men in Judah that are good enough to forego this judgment, this exile that you have called your people to. For that is what was coming. Back when I was in that garden where I saw the almond branch, he gave me a vision of this boiling pot. And inside of it was this torrent of water that was boiling. It was bubbling. And it was seated in the north, and it was tipped over Jerusalem in Judah. Later I would learn that those are the Babylonian armies that were going to come and invade Jerusalem and take its people away and exile them into Babylon. And let me tell you, as a person of my culture, being ripped from your land is painful. We associated our identity, our culture with our land, our temple, our city. And I preached that. I'm telling you, God gave me the words to preach against the nation, and I did it. I did it faithfully because he said that he would watch over his word. And I got so much because of that. There were other prophets that were preaching in the name of the Lord. They would preach that peace was here, that exile wasn't coming, that judgment wasn't coming, that God's law was with us. They were preaching peace and goodness and joy. I remember one time there was this prophet named Pasher. And he preached only good things, only good things. In his mind, criticism and rebuke was nothing and not of God. And I remember one time, I was actually arrested and paraded throughout the marketplace in Jerusalem and beaten for the words that God gave me. Looking back as a 16-year-old boy, I don't think that I had any idea of what was coming. And so again, I began to question God, why? God, why? And he began to tell me, he said, you're crying out against me, and the exile hasn't even happened yet. If you are running a foot race with men and you are weary, how will you run with the horses in the valley? If I'm weary and the exile hasn't even happened yet, what am I going to do when judgment comes? There was another time where I had been questioning God day and night, and he had me buy a loincloth from the market. Now, for those of you who don't know what a loincloth is, it's basically, a pair of whitey tighties. Now, he had me walk about 700 miles to this river, and he had me put this loincloth under this rock. And then I walked back home. A couple months later, he commanded me to go back. I went back and I found where I had hidden this loincloth, and it was dirty. It was disgusting. There were holes in it. It was slimy and gross. How many of you in here would wear a piece of underwear if you knew that a bunch of other people had been wearing it throughout the week? I don't think any of us would. To me personally, that's disgusting. And that's what God was saying. He told me that just as this loincloth clings to the waist of a man, so I created Judah to cling to me. And they have defiled themselves. They've played the whore with this land. They've allowed the Baals and the different idols to defile them. And therefore, they're useless to me. I said, God, okay, that makes sense. I understand. So why exile them? Why not just destroy them altogether? He had me go to this place. And this is when it finally clicked. He had me go to this potter's house. And I saw this potter molding this piece of clay with his hands, forming it into these intricate urns and these crazy details. I don't even know where to start on how to do that kind of stuff. But a slip of the wrist, maybe the clay wasn't as firm on one part, and it all fell. The whole thing was ruined. I was expecting him to just throw the hunk aside and get rid of it. He didn't do that. He began to beat the mound of clay and put pressure on it and to mold it back into this ball so that he could start again. And I finally got it. All of my grief, all of God's grief, it wasn't so that because he was getting rid of his people forever, it was so that he could exile them, so that he could build them up again. For that is the only way that they would forsake their idols. And I will tell you, it did happen. The exile did happen. I was right. God was right through me. There was one man that said that the exile was only going to last for 2 years. And I told him, you'll be dead in 9 months. This exile is going to last 70 years, a generation. Sure enough, 2 months later, he died. If that in and of itself is a testimony of God's word. That's just but a portion of my life and the things that I've done, the things that God had me speak. And if I were to leave you, I have 3 things that I want to leave you with as an example, a testament. And the first is, I implore you to examine your worship. What are the things that may be in the way of your worship, that you may be putting before God? Because these people, the people of Judah, they were praising God. They were praising God's name. They were in his temple. They were in his house. But he wasn't first. And because of that, he did not accept them. Examine yourselves. Examine your hearts. What are you putting before God? Baal may not be around anymore, but that doesn't mean that he can't shift and shape himself into things. Thirdly, I would say never doubt your calling. When I was 16, I doubted my calling. I said, you know what, God? I don't think I can do this. I'm just a boy. Never doubt your calling. He said he was going to watch over my word. He watched over it. It grew. It bore fruit. It may not be the ideal fruit that we may all see, but it was God's purpose. And lastly, I encourage you that if you're going through a time in life right now where grief is upon you and grief is all that you can see, I can promise you that the joy of fulfilling the purpose that God has for you is so much more. If you're getting weary for running in a foot race with men, I implore you to take strength, to take courage, and run with the horses. Thank you.
Right. Can I get a drink? Out? Sure, of course.
I need a drink. I'm thirsty. I got that coffee. There's some behind you. Oh, is it water?
No, I'm going to get some water.
Thanks.
Let me use this.
I feel like a real preacher when I get on this.